morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Abhinav Purohit from PGPM class of 2023, your host on behalf of the entire SPJMR fraternity. Welcome you all to Samavesh 2023. PGPM offers blended learning with industry exposure where these experienced participants work towards building their management acumen. The current 2023 batch has 146 talented participants from diverse backgrounds, both culturally and professionally. Vatsudev Kutumbakam, which translates to the world is one family. This ancient saying encapsulates the essence of Samavesh, that is, inclusion, underscoring that academia and industry are intertwined threads that weave our shared destiny. Spread over 2 days, the aim of Samavesh is to engage industry leaders and participants in thought-provoking discussions, enlightening presentations, and interactive panel discussions that cover a wide spectrum of topics. Samavesh this year has 6 conclaves: operations, marketing, information management, finance, human resource, and consulting. Let us begin with this year's Operations and Supply Chain Management Conclave, the theme for which is Uncover Innovative Practices Shaping the Future of Supply Chain Management. That will help us understand evolving tech, consumer shifts, and global disruptions which demand efficiency, sustainability, and adaptability, thereby creates a greater need for supply chain transformation. To achieve the same, we need to embrace the Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and redefine strategies to enhance visibility, decisions, and ethics. This theme underscores a core reality. Innovation is crucial for navigating the business landscape. For over 40 years, SPJMR has epitomized excellence in management education, cultivating leaders who excel in business and drive positive societal change. Rooted in values, we innovate, transform, and contribute to a better society. We have our PGPM program chairperson seated among us, Professor Nilendra Pawar. He brings 20 years of industry experience across different facets of supply chain management. Now it is my honor to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker, Mr. Harsh Kumar, board advisor and partner at EY. With a remarkable 24 years of rich industry experience, he has led strategic transformations for conglomerates. His vast interactions with CXOs span manufacturing, chemicals, and many more. Notably, he co-founded an agri-tech startup. An IBM partner, Mr. Kumar is also SPJMR's esteemed alumni. With a loud round of applause, let's welcome Mr. Harsh to share his insights. Sir, for your keynote speech.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, respected faculties, my esteemed colleagues from the industry, and my senior from Asian Paints, Mr. Pawar, and students, dear students. It's a real pleasure to be back in this campus. And thank you for this honor, for asking me to deliver the keynote address. And I'm really happy to see the audience and so many of you are so keen to understand what's the transformation which has changes. Before I get into the overall presentation and take you through the next 20 minutes across that, I would just like to, I don't know who made that saying, but it's a very interesting saying. These are the best of the times and the worst of the times also from a supply chain perspective. I hope some of you would agree with the kind of challenges, say, the last pandemic put across and the emphasis which it brought back onto the supply chain, and especially the war in the Europe, the kind of impact which it had. These have been really very, very phenomenal impacts onto that. The earlier supply chain concept which you would have mostly seen, okay, source, manufacture, a value add, and send it across there. It was more focused on service, cost, and with respect to these were the three couple of metrics which were there. But in the current context, the focus has also added. I mean, it's not that cost has gone out, the service levels have not is there, and those impacts are not there. But in addition to that, you have a lot of focus on agility, resilience, and sustainability. These are the three new areas which have become very critical from a supply chain perspective. I would try to cover some of them, but very underlying all these elements is the sheer infusion of tech in the last 4 5 years. It's not that it wasn't there earlier. It was there. There were a lot of there. But the three distinct trends which we are observing right now is the focus on pushing in tech, and I don't mean the machine technologies alone, which is obviously on the automation side and other areas, have always been evolving, is the sheer focus on deploying emerging tech in the supply chain at every facet of it, and which is where we will try to cover that. In India, at least the trend which personally I'm observing is the focus of taking these new technologies into the manufacturing area. That was something which is evolving, and it's on the bedrock. That's why you see a lot of conversations which are happening in that area. The second is obviously the plethora of platforms which have suddenly proliferated from both from a you can say custom of you can say from a off the shelf kind of a product to even firms are attempting in India to actually build them in house for their respective needs, whether it be on the procurement side, and some of you I think will cover that topic in the panel side. So that's the kind of transformation which is happening. The third element is, which I believe as most of you students would also be, is the exposure to the emerging tech, which is very much relevant. And when I think the MC covered some of these tech interventions which are happening, whether we talk about RPA, which I think you have a course, if I understood as well, then you have blockchain, then you have Industry 4.0 concepts. It's about how to leverage cloud platforms and to develop these, you can say, solutions to fulfill their needs. But at the same time, it doesn't take away the kind of models and the focus on the process, which are very core to try and do that, and especially in the area of sustainability. And then how do you plan for agility and resilience, keeping in the impacts which are happening from a global perspective. And it can happen at the, you can say, very short notice to that extent. And that is something as a challenge which is forcing the chief supply chain officers to really look at these technologies so that they are much better prepared than earlier times to ensure that the entire operations are not affected. So let me just quickly take you there. These are some insights which I thought I'll share it with you, but they're from a global perspective. And one of the core focus area is I would just look at the kind of focus on digital transformation which is there, and the kind of supply chain significance disruptions, if you see, with respect to the changes. That's something which I just thought I should call it out. This is the earlier supply chain, as I mentioned, is cost optimized, manual, rigid. That was like maybe 6-7 years back. The pandemic, before the pandemic, the supply chains were anyway moving towards an agile and extremely networked ecosystems, whether it be your, you can say, suppliers and then outsourced centers for manufacturing or 3PLs, and all those concepts had anyway come in. Now I think they are moving much more towards far more evolved with the infusion of these technologies towards an autonomous. Have we reached there? No, we are far away from there. But the interventions are slowly gaining speed to that extent. The two areas which are really very strong right now, which there is a lot happening, and is on how do we make our supply chains much more agile and resilient, and also focus on the sustainability aspects. In fact, a lot of you may be aware, and I might be preaching to the choir, just look at the plastic bottles. All of them, in a very innovative manner, are actually being sourced back and recycled and then delivered back as recycled products in India. That's something which you should actually check it out, and Reliance is actually doing a great job in that particular area because it's their final product on the polymer side, which they supply it to others, but they're also able to source it back and recycle it. So that's from a sustainability perspective. And I'm just sharing one firm's name. There are other firms which are doing far more specifically on the sustainability areas as well. In terms of mapping the carbon footprint, I covered circularity. Then the entire traceability and visibility of the impact which is there on from supply chain perspective, that's something which all the supply chain leaders have to really focus on, and they are actually covering. And I'm sure there will be some discussions during the panel itself. Visibility was always a focus area in supply chain, and that's become very important. But the element which is now getting added, how fast can we respond? How can we really strengthen our sources of supply? And that's a debate which is cutting across, you can say, geopolitical angles as well, with respect to alternate sources of supply, whether you're looking at auto sector, you're looking at semiconductors, you're looking at in terms of the kind of supply chains and the kind of walls which the organizations are trying to build in with respect to the respective, you can say, core areas which they do not want to be totally dependent on. So that's also shifting from what concepts we would have had maybe 10 years back about a globally connected one. So it's morphing in a very different manner. You are still connected, but then you are building in resilient moats internally. Those are, you can say, country level, which are impacting your supply chain models across the global supply chains. That's something is becoming very important. There's a lot of focus of where their sourcing of material is there, and that's where new technologies for where the product, the source of the raw material was very important. So the blockchain and other aspects also started to become very critical, and that's where trusting the source, where it's sourced, was something very crucial for it. Let me give some broad. I know it's a busy slide for you, but if you look at procurement, there are organizations which are really focused on ensuring that procurement, you can say, the process improvement. They have put in far deeper solutions to manage the procurement, and I've just given one example in that. Then you look at, you can say, the process automation, which is where I covered the topic of RPA as well. Then automated warehousing is something which is really picking up. And actually, there are a lot of organizations which have deployed automated retrieval centers. They are very good Indian firms which have done it. I have seen firms deploying actually drones to do the cycle counting as well. And they are looking at that level. So these are, you can say, 7-8 stack high in terms of the height, and the very large warehouses. It's just not possible to interface. Actually, the drone covers. And in fact, it was a core industry person who shared that he had been approached by a startup which had done this work with the CPG industry and deployed it because the cycle count was quite crucial to ensure on a per shift basis. Now, these are concepts which were earlier probably looked at a day level. Folks have actually moved on into the large warehouses, and they are trying to do it. And that's where, if you the interventions, if I were to just call out into the middle box, it's not just the usage of RPA, which is more for your transaction processing, which is there. Then, from a training perspective, from in India, I think we are still a little behind on AR, VR to a certain extent, but it's picked up in other geographies with respect to the training of the manpower, simulations, and other areas. It's already picked up. 3D printing has also picked up. Drones, I gave an example. Then, with respect to source of your supply chain, where the sourcing of the materials, there have been a lot of case studies with, you can say, organizations which have done work with the blockchain area. In India, blockchain has picked up, but not to that extent which we would have actually estimated. The RFID, which is the track and trace element, that's a technology which is now fairly pervasive, especially in certain sectors, which is there. Then, with respect to autonomous vehicles, maybe not in India that to extent, but folks are really testing, and a lot of you would be actually covering those elements. I will try and do a little deep dive. I'm not covering the control tower as an aspect, which is something which is becoming very crucial because of these networked supply chain across, and to ensure the agility and the resilient is there. And I'll try and cover one slide also on the technical architecture. Now, that's just an illustrative, so don't go by, okay, a particular OEM was used or a different use. You can actually have, you can replace that with another competing product itself. The usage of data and analytics is extremely deep now. It's becoming very crucial, and that's a trend which we are also noticing, where it's not just do I buy it, these interventions, but do I actually look at these interventions from a build in-house perspective, or I just outrightly buy a startup and bring it in-house so that I can do it my way also. And that kind of ties back into the kind of strengths and interdependencies questions which are raising with respect to earlier, that you were okay, you were willing to outsource certain things, but what do you want to outsource is a big question now, and especially on data and the usage of the data is becoming very important. As a result, the cyber aspect is becoming crucial, and a lot of concepts from a manufacturing area, especially the OT security, is now as being looked as a very crucial area of a supply chain, because at no stage you want to be under an impact due to any other reasons to shut down your operations at all. And that's over time, and it's becoming a reasonably focused area, which actually brings into another intervention which is coming quite closely inside, is the kind of work which is being picked up from an edge analytics perspective, as to how much of data can you really source from those equipments and the machines to try and build it. The second large trend which we are seeing, at least in India, to pick up, and obviously the global, is apart from the control towers, which I'll cover, is the digital twin concept itself. Now, whether it be firms are looking at from, nobody has gone at a full-blown digital twin, but people are definitely looking at from a process twin and a replica of your asset twin as well. So those elements which we are noticing within the Indian, you can say, corporate world, fairly picking up. So that's another trend. And that brings in a host of these elements of interventions, whether it be from a cloud, analytics, sensorizations from an IoT, picking up data, and making sure the AI, ML, and everything comes in together. And that's where you will now understand when I meant is why organizations are probably looking that, do I buy off the shelf a product, or I buy a startup, bring it in-house, and or build it ground up. All three options are on the table depending on your capacity for risk-taking and managing the project itself. I said I'll probably the next three charts which I'll try and cover for you is the kind of control tower focus which is coming in from a supply chain. Now, when you look at, there used to be within the firm, obviously you still had silos, and I'm talking about different systems from a logistics perspective. Sometimes you there from a financial perspective, there was a lot of consolidation which had already happened, but they were still under, you can say, peripheral systems which were there. But now nobody wants to restrict to their own firm. They're also looking at their suppliers' information, which they can bring in. They can get in their dealers' information, which they can manage the demand sensing, and then look the entire information in a very structured manner to try and build models by which they can sense the demand and make sure all that they have, their models are able, not just able to predict, but they are able to respond well, which goes back to the first thing which I talked about, the resilient and the agility. These are, you can say, these are initiatives which are actually rolling up to the broad theme of agility and resilience, which I talked about earlier. Some of the dashboards, which these are illustrative dashboards, which I'm just trying to show, but the process digital twin is a sub-element in this, which tries to come up. There are multiple things these are not easy to execute. It requires a fair amount of complex understanding of the process. The tech interventions, as you would see it in the next chart, which I would take, to try and make sure that it really delivers value to your organization. Leave the specific OEM part, but this chart should give you a fair amount of complex architecture which are being put across there. So you have stuffs being delivered out of cloud. You have in internal earlier systems, so there's a lot of integration elements. You're trying to put in process thought leadership, and then you're trying to develop your AI/ML models on top of it to try and deliver. But the whole concept is making sure that every system is integrated, you're able to see it in a comprehensive manner, and you're able to source that information to get it back and then simulate it with respect to maybe a process twin or even for that matter an asset twin. And you can replace any of these systems with the systems which are actually existing. So this is just a replaceable element which I talked about. Another interesting, as I said, is the tech interventions which is happening in the core manufacturing area. There is a lot of focus on how best I can work with my original equipment manufacturer. And I think without taking, if I may quote one of my colleagues, you were talking about your ability to ensure that the equipment information in a central there, even if it is deployed in public area, that's something which is a lot of you can say firms have done it, and I think she had very rightly presented that case or shared with us that how elevators, you can say the entire management, their operational uptime and all information, they're able to track it on a central level. And almost all the firms in the elevator space have tried to put these solutions in, which gives a very good consumer experience because you are able to ensure aspect of uptime and there. In fact, one of the elevator firm CEO actually went ahead and said, we are not just an elevator company, but we are also a people movement company, because the data which it generates, now they were thinking of monetizing that data to try and build models by which they could actually predict the movement of the people in the various there, and then monetize it for various consumption in a consolidated manner. So it's not just a cost function, but it's also in certain, what the data which is getting generated is now actually being leveraged to make, you can say, models by which you can actually generate revenue models, you can say, specific products which you can take it out. I'll give one more example from a core industry in this particular area. Most of the heavy equipment which gets used in the in the mining industry is generally used to be sold with respect to, from a capex perspective. You would have those heavy dumpers, equipments, and so the firms have actually built, you can say, whole platforms by which the entire business model of a capex sale Now they are turning it into an OpEx model saying, okay, I'll guarantee you, say 50,000 or 200,000 hours of uptime. So that's my responsibility. And I'll ensure that, and based on that, you keep paying me that. So that is based on these interventions. And I'm talking about core industry. I'm not even gone to a CPG industry, which actually did pilots in India, as well as took this model to the Far East, wherein they said you could pay by the number of hours or the literage which we would dispense out of our water purifiers. We could do that model. So it's leading to different models as well. And these are actually, you can say, product or supply chain or those tech interventions which are enabling your ability to analyze that data and store that data and enhance that data and then go back into the market with new models itself. So I wouldn't just restrict it to, you can say, a cost function. And that's why I want you to go back to the earlier concept, which I talked about. Is it just a cost function or a service or a quality? Those are the three elements which we talk. But now with agility, sustainability, and resilience, can you create new business models itself and make it a revenue generation? And that's where the core underlying principle of the data becomes important. And as a result, one element which I talked about, while in terms of an OT perspective, but is all the entire how do you protect the data from a cyber perspective. So all these elements is something, it's not just a tech domain, it's actually a business domain. You have to look at from the impact on your business which it can have. So these are questions which are actually bothering most of not just the chief supply chain officers, not just the CIOs, but even the CEOs also they are worried about there, because your entire operations can be shut down. And some of you would have experienced in Mumbai and other areas when there were ransomware attacks or there were other attacks, the entire operation shut down there. So that's where I just thought I'll cover some of these concepts. The bedrock of these fundamental technologies, and I'll quickly take you through, you can say, some 4-5 charts in that area, is the bedrock has to be your cloud adoption, because there is no way you can say, harness this much of data, process this data without adoption of cloud. And it could be any cloud, it could be on, and plus, as I talked about, is the entire edge compute and edge analytics, which is being driven. And with the 5G rollout in India, this will only go up. It's not going to, the clock is not going to turn back. And that's where the data protection is what I'm emphasizing it again and again, becomes very important to bring it in. And most of the firms are actually on this journey, you can say, far advanced in terms of deployment. Blockchain, there are a lot of use cases, especially from the sourcing, traceability, track and trace, and making sure with the vendors. But has it really scaled up? Not exactly to that extent at which we would have expected, but it's being leveraged at various firms in very distinct, even core manufacturing industries. But the trend, what we are noticing is it's not the core industries which are driving it, it's the financial institutions which are trying to get these interventions in to streamline the entire process which is there. We talked about AI/ML models because of the ability to, you can say, harness the data, process this data, and build your own models. The question is, do you do it? And that's where the cloud adoption is also there, because most of these models are leveraging the native capabilities of those cloud service providers, as well as, in some cases, external interventions. RPA definitely is heavily used from your transaction processing perspective. It's almost like the normal thing which is being looked across as to how fast I can do three-way matching of invoices, how can I expedite it, whether it's my shared services, which I have done, or I have done it with respect to finance, HR, which are other system, you can say not just the ARAP, but also in terms of, you can say, employee processing and other areas. 3D printing is also picking up. This is something which is important. Then a lot of, you can say, specific tryouts are happening as to what best is there. Is it on a very large scale? No, not exactly, but this is something to watch out to a certain extent. I did give an example of drone. We are looking at examples of drone-based delivery, the way the policies are being talked about. I think at some stage we will see. But definitely from, you can say, visibility perspective, as I gave you that example of counting when automate warehouses and other areas, if you don't have an automated ARS system, then there are people are actually looking at drones to try and count their stuff, or even monitor the pipelines or monitor the survey of the areas. So that is something which is really picking up speed in India, and India is actually emerging at in a very high, fast pace in the drone ecosystem as well. RFID, I think, is done. You all would have experienced it. You would have seen it. It's fairly used. I'll not probably go much deeper because I think one of the biggest is the deployment of the FASTag, which we saw, and how that information now goes back into the digital public infrastructure, and then government is able to harness, and that's becoming one of the pivots of. This is a new concepts which are coming in terms of the tag in the near time, which is picking up, and that's where it is also linked to the kind of edge analytics which you can potentially do through sourcing of this information, and especially with the 5G rollout. Autonomous vehicles in India, it's not there, but globally, that's something which is we see as a big trend, which is emerging, and it will continue. There were little setbacks in some time back in terms of how safe and how there. But where there is a safety issue is being addressed, those interventions are being focused on. AR/VR as a concept, there was a lot of conversation there globally, yes. In terms of training, this is being used, especially from an employee perspective, how best you can train where the workforce are aging. In India, it's been deployed, but it's not really reached the scale which somebody would have estimated earlier. This is something which I thought would be important, the kind of initiative which the government is taking through their Gati Shakti, ensuring all their government systems are well integrated and understood, and both from, you can say, the logistics perspective and their various systems, and cutting across the ministries of the road, the transports, and the other areas which are quite crucial with respect to making sure the seamless processing of the information and cutting down the delays and which used to be there, and this will have a very significant impact, which we at least believe in terms of the overall GDP as well. Last chart which I would like to share is all these interventions have to be looked in three levels. Either you are doing it at a very tactical level, maybe getting a small problem in a specific area of your supply chain fixed, but you might look, they're disjointed pieces. But then finally, it is trying to address those core issues, is how do I make my supply chain much more resilient, agile, because it's all about knowing the information, how fast you can sense and respond to it. And last but not the least, how do I make it much more sustainable? So these are the three distinct trends which are driving all these interventions. Now, it's up to that organization whether they want to, a particular area is far more crucial to them. So they might look at that intervention a little first is in terms of drawing up their priority roadmap. But bottom line, there is interventions, not just earlier supply chain concept, which we talked about of only planning systems. It's gone into the manufacturing, as I talked about. It's gone into, look at the various product development and as well as interventions on the consumer side, which lead back into a better consumer experience and your product offtake and new business models. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Harsh, for your thought-provoking speech on digital intervention in supply chain. This has brought our focus on the importance of agility, resilience, and sustainability, along with the diffusion of technology, and how important it is to understand how newer technologies are shaping our future. Moving ahead towards our next phase of our conclave, which is student presentation. To promote the thought on innovative practices shaping the future of supply chain management, our PGPM students, inclusive of Soumyajit, Chirantan, and Akshita, have crafted an insightful presentation on application of artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, and control tower to increase visibility in supply chain. Let's warmly welcome Soumyajit and Chirantan to the stage for presenting.
Good morning all. I am Chirantan Guin. I am going to be presenting on the topic of application of IoT, AI/ML and control tower in SCM. In the current situation, the supply chain has evolved into a complex and a global network of stakeholders. The complexity has led to the rise of supply chain disruptions. A McKinsey report suggests that during the pre-pandemic period, a company experienced 2 months of supply chain disruptions every 3.7 years. We all know what happened during the pandemic. The supply chain kind of failed. Under such uncertainties, the traditional supply chain, which focuses on cost, capital, service, and quality, fails. Hence, the world is moving towards a future supply chain, which additionally focuses on resilience, sustainability, and agility. The traditional supply chain approach is linear and siloed, while the future supply chain demands integrated and a collaborative approach. The decision making in the traditional supply chain is based on past experiences and individual judgments, while the future supply chain demands a data-driven decision making. Now let us have a look at the current scenario in the supply chain. There are 4 main stakeholders in the supply chain: the suppliers, the manufacturing unit, warehouse logistics, and the distribution channels. The goods flows from the suppliers to the manufacturing unit through the WMS, and the distribution channel, it reaches the consumers. Each of the 4 stakeholders has their own ERP systems. The problem is that this ERP system does not communicate with each other, and hence this gives rise to an information asymmetry, which leads to the following problems in the traditional supply chain, like siloed planning, bullwhip effect, inefficient logistics, lack of real-time visibility, manual processes, and value leakages. An integrated SCM network will help us enhance the visibility in the supply chain. As we already said, that there are 4 main stakeholders of the supply chain: the retailers, distribution channels, logistics, and the warehouse. The data is collected from each of the stakeholders through POS, terminals, and IoT. The data moves to a control tower level through the cloud servers. At the control tower level, the data is integrated and assimilated and presents a single dashboard operation to the central planning team. The central planning team then finalizes the production plan and sends it to the manufacturing unit. On the other hand, the sourcing and the procurement team collects the quotations from the suppliers and finalizes the order based on the past performance records and the feedback received from the plant. After finalization of the contract, the suppliers sends the raw materials to the manufacturing plant. For additional visibility, the plant shares their production data and the status with the suppliers to better manage their resources. Now, we have collected all this data. This data is of no use until we use it for decision making. Here comes in the role of the supply chain control tower, which acts as the brain of this integrated supply chain system. A supply chain control tower is a cloud-based solution that leverages technologies such as AI, ML, and IoT to proactively manage the supply chain. For the functionalities of a supply chain control tower are, it integrates structured and unstructured data collected from various sources in the supply chain, offers real-time insights to value chain managers through user-friendly dashboards. It leverages detailed visibility, predicts near-future scenarios, and identifies probable risks. Hence, it is able to trigger early warning systems and notifies the process owners. It also supports automated decision-making and self-correction. To draw an analogy, the supply chain control tower is analogous to an airport control tower. Just as the airport control tower controls all the aircrafts in an airport, the supply chain control tower controls and coordinates with all the stakeholders in the supply chain for smooth functioning of the supply chain. With this, I'll now request Samajit to take it forward.
Thank you, Chirantan. Now let us see how a sample control tower dashboard looks like. The dashboard displays key metrics, KPIs, and other relevant data in the form of visual elements. So we can monitor location-wise demand, location-wise available inventory, production planning required with respect to forecast and available inventory. On the supplier side, supplier contribution, supplier's available capacity, as well as on the 3PL or logistics side, each region's freight cost and distributor-wise sales data. Also, the dashboard can trigger alerts and notifications when certain disruptions occur. This will enable prompt decision making. Now, as we know, in a typical supply chain, there are a lot of uncertainties. So we want to highlight some scenarios which impact business. This could be demand variability, suppliers disruption, internal crisis at our own manufacturing unit, ad hoc logistic planning, and the one-off cases. By doing analysis with the help of control tower, we can get benefits in the form of risk identification, strategic decision making, reduced reaction time, and early warning systems. Now we have seen the problem and the solution. Let us see the backend of our solution. So the supply chain IoT consists of 4-layer architecture. The first layer is the hardware platform, that is the sensors, RFID, scanning terminals, which will collect data from the manufacturing unit. Secondly, the software platform that will provide necessary infrastructure for data processing and data management. It is like integrated ERP, WMS, LMS, and others. Thirdly, the cloud and the edge, which will ensure efficient data storage, easy access of data on the go, and integration. And fourthly, the front end of our application, that is the various dashboards, such as supplier dashboard, retailer dashboard, and 3PL and logistic dashboard, which will ensure end-to-end supply chain visibility. Now, coming to the benefits that we shall get after implementing this solution, it can be of 3 forms. Firstly, operational. So the single dashboard will give a bird's eye view of the business that help in decision making, single source of truth, inventory and logistic facility optimization, and others. Secondly, analytic ability like predictive analysis, risk management, root cause analysis. Thirdly, increased collaboration due to centralized communication, cross-functional alignment, and cross-team insights. All these features add to resilience and agility of the system. Apart from that, these benefits will add to sustainability goals such as decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, partnership for the goals, and climate actions. Now let us see a use case of a company Avon, which is a cosmetic company, and the solution provider is online solution. The here challenge was to integrate sales, finance, and supply chain functions for better data-driven decision making. The problem was that there was overstocking, leading to reduced storage space in distribution center, lack of system collaboration between distribution center and 3PL, limited visibility of inventory. The technology implemented was integrated business planning and control tower, and the solution was O9 Enterprise Knowledge Graph, which ensured end-to-end visibility, horizontal and vertical integration, accelerate identification of risk and opportunities. And the notable outcomes were increased productivity by 15%, reduction of inventory by 12%, improvement of top-line sales by reducing stockouts. Now let us see the steps that we are taking to overcome the challenges. Firstly, there will be IoT-enabled device for real-time data capturing. Additionally, we shall have API integration with rail, airfare, and logistics to get instant pricing, cloud services for computational power, blockchain technology for prevention of data tampering, and compatibility between different ERP systems to mitigate delay between communication systems. And lastly, we shall do pilot implementation for training to mitigate resistance from workforce. So the solution will remove information asymmetry between different stakeholders of a supply chain, and also reduce stockouts, inventory cost, and increase of efficiency. So that's from our side presentation. Thank you.